Hi, I'm Juniper Belmont. I'm here to talk to you about progressive web apps, why you might or might not want to build them. You'll learn a little bit about them versus native apps, but not versus native apps, and you'll see. This is me. I'm a genderqueer developer advocate at bawdy. I live in Seattle. I'm here for just today. I'm not going to go see any of the sites. It's just too warm here. It's sunny. It's supposed to be like 50 degrees and raining right now, which is what it is up in Seattle. Which is the correct temperature. I mean, it's November. Come on, get with the program authority. This is me shooting slingshots at my friend's place. My friend is very serious about self-defense, including slingshots and homemade mace, which has dubious legality. It's true. I work for a company called bawdy. Bawdy is a Finnish company with locations in Berlin and California. I work remotely. Bawdy creates open source and paid frameworks and components for building better web apps. We, like was said in the introduction, our goal is to make people stop worrying about the platform that they're writing on so that they can focus more on building high-quality web apps. We have a set of open source web components which you can plug into your web application just through a custom HTML tag. You don't have to do anything, you just import the files and then you can insert them into, regardless of frameworks. We have Polymer bindings, but also Angular bindings, and we have a little bit of React support, but I mean, React people. They're pretty good. You should check out some of the components. We're proud of them. So why are we here today? We're here because progressive web apps are one of those things that people talk about all the time, and by all the time, I mean I talk about them at various events, and other people talk about them too. They're a new thing that were designed as kind of a way of thinking about the web in a different way. Thinking about the web as a cross-platform solution for building high-quality apps that people can use anywhere. So we're going to talk about what progressive web apps are, where they stand in relationship to native apps on different devices, and why you might or might not want to build with progressive web apps. So progressive web app, the term, was defined by Francis Berriman and Alex Russell last year to talk about a new style of web app. Not different, but with a focus on quality and things like a set of criteria that they laid out. Things like security, things like accessibility, things like responsive, things like performance. These are what make a progressive web app, But it's a set of criteria, but it's not the definition of them. The definition of a progressive web app is a high-quality web app. So there are new technologies that make progressive web apps possible or probable, depending on how you feel about it. Things like Service Worker, which is a programmable proxy on the web, which lives as a web worker, so it runs in a background thread and it can access your page, but not the DOM. It can just give you better control over the network. And it can also work with built-in browser database like IndexedDB or app cache, so you could cache your static files so that they're available next time you load it. There's Web App Manifest, which is a simple JSON file or XML file that is a series of like what your web app is. It has an icon, it has a color, so that when you have your web app, the browser on any machine knows what it is. Like it knows what the name is. And if you add it to your home screen, then you give it the short name, so you don't have just like a ... at the end of your web page name. Add to home screen is another new functionality which exists on Firefox, Chrome on Android, but also Samsung Internet on Samsung devices. And some little bits of it are on iOS devices. And add to home screen makes it so that your web app looks like a native app. It has its little icon in a square or a circle. It looks just like what a native app would look like, as far as your home screen is concerned. But that's all, like, that's different parts about progressive web apps, and there are much better talks than mine about all those different technologies. There's lots of great code labs and tutorials. But the main point of progressive web apps is creating quality apps for all platforms. Instead of building a separate app for the web, for tablet, for phone, for different platforms, you could build a web app. You could leverage the power of the web to make better, high-quality apps. They're kind of the future. It's technology that's up and coming. It's things that are already in the specification, and a lot of browsers are already supporting them, and all the other major browsers have said that they're going to support service workers, they're going to support web app manifest and add to home screen. This is going to happen on all platforms. And if you run it in the browser, then you already, if you run it on desktop, then you have all the features available to you. 90% of the time. It's okay. So what are progressive web apps not? They're not a different way of writing web apps specifically. They're not here to take your Angular apps or your React apps or your single page apps that do things a certain way. They work with those different libraries and frameworks to use the platform to enhance what you already have. It's not just a Google thing. I'm here talking on behalf of Baden. We work a lot with Google, but this is something that everybody should care about. This is something that a lot of people do care about. Microsoft and Mozilla hosted a workshop just a few weeks ago that I had the pleasure to join. Opera cares about this, Samsung cares about this, the Financial Times cares about this, Washington Post cares about this. There's a lot of people who really care about progressive web apps, and it's not just something that Google created and is going to drop in 2 years, like any number of products that I can name. Yeah, you know which ones I'm talking about. And it's not a hybrid app. It's not writing web code that runs on native devices. It's writing web code that runs on the mobile web. It uses URLs like you would use a URL that you can just copy paste. But it uses the best features of the web platform to deliver a application that's just as good as you can get from a Cordova app, but using entirely web platform specifications. Oh, sorry. And they're not killing native apps. And I think this is the point that I want to stress most in this talk is native apps aren't going away. They're not just the old thing. The reason I put a question mark on the previous slide about whether progressive web apps are the future is because they're a solution in a vast toolbox of different ways of writing web apps. Hopefully you'll find out today why you might or might not want to build progressive web apps, and why you might or might not want to build native apps. You probably have really good reasons already about why you care about the web, or why you care about Android, or why you care about iOS. But you can still care about those things and care about the web more, because I like the web. And that's the point I really want to make, is that progressive web apps are not for everybody. They don't fit every single use case that you might have. You might want a game to run really performant, so you might run that on a native device. There are certain API hardware features which are not currently available on the web. I'm not sure really good examples, but things like your contact list on your phone, you can't access that through a web app. But you're still going to have your phone. So there's reasons to use native apps, and there's reasons to make web apps. Again, I'm going to hammer this home that it's not a dichotomy between people who care about Android and people who care about the web. It's about making the right decision for yourself for the app that you're building. But when it comes down to it, you have to, when you're building your next application to sponsor something or to tie into a physical a device or a physical manifestation of what you're building. Like, whenever you're like launching a new product, you have to decide what you're going to do with it. And what you decide matters specifically by who is going to be using your application and what are they going to be doing with it. And how are they going to use your application. There are specific use cases that work basically, that will make sense for you to build a native app. There are things like, if you have, for example, a warehouse app where you scan barcodes on each item as you put them into the warehouse, and as items come out of the warehouse, you give everybody the same device. It has, it's an iOS or Android device or something like that, or a built device, and it has a barcode scanner on it, and then they return it to you at the end of the day. Well, if it's easier for you to write a native app to fulfill that function, then just build a native app. That's fine. You don't need to have all the benefits of a web app, all the benefits and detriments of a web app. There are certain things that, there are other criteria that matter when you're trying to decide what you're going to do. Things like, who's going to be using your web app? Can you know what their data requirements are? I mean, their data allowances are? Do you know how much it's going to cost them to download your application if it's on an app store? Do you know how findable that is on the app store? Do you know if that's going to be available in their locale versus on the web? Do you know if they have space on their device to download your 120 megabyte Facebook app? The Facebook app is probably the biggest loser on these things because you have this giant application that you have to download for the first time, which can be really slow. Like, try setting your phone into 3G mode and download any kinds of apps from the App Store. You will be like surprised. Like, it's like the old Windows 95 install screens where it's just ticking and the little folders going and the files are going and then get stuck at 99% for like a minute and a half or an hour depending. And then, so you have your app installed, you have your Facebook app, and then 2 weeks later they say, oh, hey, look, we have a bunch of bug fixes and we have a couple of features. Great, now download another 80 megabytes. So that might be your entire internet budget on a developing platform that you maybe can't afford. So do you just say, oh, okay, well, we can't have, this is the only way our app works, we're just gonna kick all those other people aside? Well, no, you might want to build a web app for that. So you have to decide who's using your app and what strategy you want to do. This is an image that's been going around a lot in progressive web app circles. I'll let you read it for just a second. So that's what I'm talking about. It's the web. Everyone can access the web. Well, not everybody. Sometimes the web is restricted in certain places. But if the web is restricted in certain places, app stores are probably even more restricted in certain places. The web is something that is universal. It's something where we care about everybody being able to access it. It's an open standard. It's there for everybody. But at the same time, the web is kind of hard to develop for. I've heard several times today that you get knowledgeable in one technology or another, and then, a few months down the line, it's like, oh, hey, look, we got this cool new thing. Like, Yarn just came out. It's like, all the people using NPM now have to use Yarn. What? It's like Polymer 2 is coming out. Now everybody has to search Polymer 2. Angular 2, that's kind of hurt a lot of people because I know how to use Angular, but Angular 2 is just very different. React kind of threw people for a loop when it came out because it had a completely different way of doing things. And now React is everywhere, and so you have to know React. So you kind of feel like there's this lock-in when you build a web app, where if you were building an Angular app, then you're going to have to make everything Angular app. You're going to have to make Angular components. You're going to have to import Angular directives. It's all Angular all the time, and that's what you're going to have to do. And then if you decide to make a text switch into something else, then you're going to spend a lot of effort to recreate what you have. But I'm going to argue that this is the same thing what happens when you build a native application for Android or iOS. You're going to invest all of your time into building this app to the detriment of perhaps the other platform, or an other platform, or people who only have the mobile web. So there's lock-in all around, and these are things to consider. One example that I like to bring up with the topic of why the web is hard and why you might want to give lock-in to one of the platforms. So I met somebody in Boston that's working on a project. It's an in-home, like a horticulture system. It's like hydroponics, but like really fancy. Like you can make your own little garden. It has a little plotter that like pokes the soil and puts a seed in. Like really cool stuff. I was impressed. Like, oh yeah, that sounds really cool. I wonder how much. Oh, they're like $15,000 for the basic one. It's like, you know, more than that for the advanced ones. So they wanted to have an application that people can use to get on their phone and then control the humidity and control the light and monitor what they have. So they tried building it with the web and they couldn't get the performance results that they wanted. So instead of working and trying to make the web app better, they shipped an iPhone to every single person who bought their thing because they felt that it was easier to build an iPhone app. I mean, face palming, like, right? I mean, it's that's the way that you have to do these things sometimes. So let's say you're hearing me talk this talk, and you hear me talking about the web and how it's so good, but then you're wondering, is this available everywhere? Is this going to be something that I could actually build in my application? Can I bring this back to my employer or startup and say, hey, look, this is something that we could build? It takes some level of trust to say that you care about the web and that the web is going to be better. The web platform, the specifications are really slow going. It took how many years to just get like the template tag? I mean, probably people don't really care about the template tag. How many years did it get to take to put CSS transforms into the web, to have animations that don't require like JavaScript? That took a long time. Android released like 4 versions in that time, from like cookie dough to gingerbread, I think, in the same time, to create really powerful animation features on an Android device. So when you decide how you're going to do that, maybe you don't really think about the web. But with the web, there's benefits. You always serve the exact most recent copy of your application, because anyone who hits your website hits it and they don't have to upload or they don't have to download anything. It's like that XKCD picture. It's the latest version of the app, no matter what. And it runs the same on every application, on every platform, on every browser, more or less. Or it will. Like, that's the point. So I see it in 2 ways when I talk about why you might want to build a progressive web app. Either, or why you might not. So either you decide to build one now, and then you get all the kudos, like I mentioned, like the Washington Post and the Financial Times earlier today, about building a progressive web app. Patagonia had a native app that they switched into a progressive web app, and then the native app, they pushed a tiny update that said, like, thank you for using our native app. Now you can uninstall it and just hit our website, patagonia.com, or whatever it is. And then you just get, like, that's their app. So you could transfer people. And the fact that I'm telling you about Patagonia is in your favor, because then you can talk about progressive web apps yourselves, and then you have like all the benefits of being an early adopter. Or you could wait until the web platform matures and this is available on more browsers, if you so care. But either way, you win, because this is a new way of building web apps. Yeah, there we go. This is PWA.rocks. It's a list with pictures of lots of different progressive web apps that are already out there. Some of these are little pet projects. Some of these are recreations, like 2048, in the web of something else. But then there's like the Washington Post up in the top left, top right there, which is an entirely, if you go to beta.washingtonpost.com, it gives you the progressive web app. And I actually use that one. Like I like the Washington Post, and I get good news there. And I like using it because it has like offline features. It has everything I want. And I can share URLs from there just like anything else. And I don't have to download anything. I hate when I have to download things. Every download I have to have for my bank, for like every airline plan I'm using, for every like conferences have their own apps. It's silly. Yeah, use the physical web like here. You can just have a little beacon and then you just hit a website and it just looks the same. Also, there's a Pokédex app in case you play Pokemon Go and you want to find out what type of things are. You can go to the Pokédex app. It's actually pretty good. And this is the point, this is the final point, is that when you're building a web app, you figure out what it is you want to build, who you want to reach, how you want to reach them, whether you care about lock-in in one way, if you care about lock-in in the other way, whether you know your entire user base or whether you don't, whether they're in one market or the other. It's a decision. It's not native versus web. It's native plus web, or web plus web, or native plus native. It's this wide ecosystem. Thank you. Find me on Twitter. Send me direct messages. I will respond to all, like 4 of them that I've gotten about progressive web apps. It's sometimes a small space, but it's really good. And you can go to bawdy.com/elements. I have to plug it because they paid for me to be here. And go there to check out our web component, custom elements.